Hello! Welcome to DIY is My Happy Place. I'm Amy and today we're going to be making gnome shoes. I have a couple of gnome shoe tutorials, but I wanted to be more precise. There's been a few questions and a few things that I didn't describe or explain quite as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do one more tutorial. But let me tell you this, the key to gnome shoes is this little gadget right here. And I'm sure you're wondering, what? How does that make a difference for gnome shoes? Well, I am going to show you. I'm going to go ahead and show you right here. What I do is I get these balloon yardstick straws from the Dollar Tree. Now they don't always have them. If you can't get them from the Dollar Tree, you can order them from Amazon, and I will put a link in the description below. But the bottom line is, when we make the gnome shoes, we take a piece of the balloon straw that's glued into the shoe. Then we have this cute little attachment thing that goes into the straw. And then this is the part of the gnome leg that hooks into the shoe. Boom. And you can make a standing gnome with them. So this is the best. So let's have some fun. Now that I've made probably 80 pairs of gnome shoes in my day, I've learned a thing or two. And this is the one that I made during our live last week, but it was a little bit hard to see, and I actually tweaked it a little bit. Sometimes after I do things, I'll look at it and I'll think, no, I want it to look a little bit different, and I did a few different things. So today I'm going to give the full-on version, every single part of how to make gnome shoes. I'm not going to speed it up unless it's redundant. And of course, again, we're going to be using these straws. Now there's two different straws that you can get, these yardstick straws, when you go to the Dollar Tree. So I want to make sure that it's clear which one you need. One is skinnier than the other. You need the pack that has 4 in a pack, and it's a little bit bigger around. Those are the only ones that have the little tiny attachment that actually makes this all work. So when I zoom in, you can see that one is way bigger than the other. Now the skinnier one we can use for something else, but the ones that come 4 to a pack, they have these little attachments. And again, I'll put a link in the description below for the Amazon version of these, because sometimes you just can't get them at the Dollar Tree. They just don't have them in stock all the time. I want to show you how this actually works. Now, this is a main gnome body that I do all types. Anytime I'm doing a standing gnome, this is basically how I start. Put glue up in there with the straws, and it'll be very hard, but it's also lightweight because it's just cotton. And it's a sock that I got from the Dollar Tree. And then look, it can just hold itself up even with just one shoe. That's the beauty of these standing gnomes and using this technique. It's definitely worth it. And then you can do any style, any design, any type. There's so many different types of gnomes that I love to do. But I will say that if it's a gnome that's from a motion picture or a major TV show or whatever, I definitely get put in YouTube jail if I try to do those. So they have to be pretty generic, but the idea is you can do anything with them. Now those other smaller straws, I use those to make my gnome signs, and I have tutorials about that. We're going to go ahead and get started. Now this is an example of the templates that I used when I did my felt gnomes, and there's different sizes of the shoes and the bands that you use to go around. And once again, I will have a link below for templates, but I'm also going to show you how you can create your own. Now these are the foam that I'm going to be using for the shoes. I order it in bulk and it's quite reasonable, but you can get it at any craft type store. Now I like the glitter ones or the dull. You can use different, it really depends on what style you're trying to go for. But I think today I'm going to do a glittery gold. Now you're going to need 3 pieces of foam, and they can be 3 different colors. One for the main shoe, one for the band that goes around the bottom, and one for the sole. They can all three be the same color, or they can all three be different colors, or any combination, just depending on the look you want your shoe to look like. Now here are the cups that I get. Now you can get these, they're 1 ounce condiment cups. You can get them at Sam's Club or sometimes at Dollar Tree. I haven't seen them at the Dollar Tree for probably a year. I just get them off of Amazon. You just want them to be the plastic, kind of bendable plastic. There's the plastic that's really hard, but the kind that you would get that sometimes they come with a lid with, you'd get your ketchup in. Now, let's get started and I'll show you what we're going to do to create our gnome shoe. We're going to want the black dole for the sole. We want to find the middle of this cup, and the easiest way to do that is to cut a triangle out. Now, you don't have to worry if your scissors cut up too high because this is just to form the top. It's actually where the toe is going to be on the gnome shoe, and we're just doing this little triangle cut so that we can cut it in half because we want this one to be half as tall as the back part of the shoe. So we're just going to cut this around, and of course we're going to do everything in twos, and I don't want to be too redundant, so I'm going to go ahead and do some of the duplicate parts off camera, or I'll speed that part along. We're going to put this all on a piece of cardboard. There's different types of cardboard that you can use. I've used every type of cardboard. The really thick box cardboard. This is a little bit thinner cardboard. Really the best cardboard that I've found is the thickness that goes with a U.S. postal box, if you know how thick that is. But it doesn't have to be. It could be thinner or it could be thicker. And we're going to, again, I will give you a link below to get to my blog to print off the templates if you want a template. But if you want to just make your own, this is how you do it. You just put them down and circle around like this in order to create a template, and then it's just a matter of cutting that out for the bottom of the shoe. Now the reason that we have the cardboard is because we need a firm foundation in order for this gnome not to tip over. I can't even tell you how many times I've made standing gnomes. They're so cute, everything looks great, then when I put it together they're just tippy. They just keep on tipping over. And so I've found if you just have a firm foundation to begin with, then your gnomes won't tip over and they can stand on their own. So that is just the most ideal way. Okay, now that I've got my cardboard cut out, I'm going to trace the cardboard silhouette onto my non-glitter black foam. Now, here's an important part too. When you're outlining this, you want it to be bigger than the cardboard because the cardboard is where you're going to butt up the shoe that goes up around. I can't explain this very well. Trust me on this. Just make it so that it is just a little bit bigger than the outline of the cardboard. The width of the foam itself, or even a little bigger than that, because we can trim that down afterwards. And this is a key part in order to make the bottom of the shoe look really nice. And the thing of it is when you are giving a gnome away, it's true when it's sitting up on a shelf, you don't really see the bottom of the shoe, but when you're carrying it around, you do. So it just looks so much more professional if the bottom of the shoe looks good too. Now I use 2 different glue guns. I have the kind of glue gun that can go low or high, and then a very hot, old, strong glue gun, and we're going to need both of them. So we're going to start with my old, heavy-duty, hot glue, and I'm going to give a generous amount of this glue onto the cardboard, and then I'll put my foam right over the top of that. And this, of course, is the hot kind that will burn your fingers, so you just want to be really careful with that. Put that on there, and I do like to put it on the cardboard first because this hot glue will melt this foam if it sits on it too long. and that's why we want 2 types of foam. But we definitely need the hotter kind because it's hot to begin with, but it's also a lot stronger. And again, it's all about having a firm foundation. So once we get that glue on, we're going to give a generous amount of glue all the way around on the cardboard. And you don't want it to seep off onto the felt, but just onto, it's not felt, it's foam. And then you take your big cup and glue it down onto the back. And then the one that we cut in half, we're going to glue onto the front. Now it's very fragile, and when it dips into that hot glue, it'll try to melt a little bit. So it's just kind of on the very edge of it. You just get enough so that it's going to stay in place, and you can kind of squish it around, but you don't want to put it right in the thick of the hot glue or it'll just kind of wither away and melt away. Now we're going to take our hot glue gun and poke a hole right down the center. Now you'll see that my cup is starting to melt a little bit on the edges because of where the glue is below it, and that's okay. It's okay if it leans a little bit, but we poked a hole right through the center that our straw can fit through, and that's how we're going to glue our straw in. And it's called, I keep calling it a straw because it really is a straw, but they call it a balloon stick when you are trying to order it or pick it up. And I love these so much better than dowels because I can just cut it with scissors, and then also it's just so much easier to work with. I can really manipulate it more. So once you get the hole in there, then you're going to give a generous amount of hot glue and let it fill up about 1/4 of the cup down in the bottom. And then put your straw in, and then the next thing is we're just going to set that aside and let it cool. And it takes a while to cool when you have a bunch of glue down in there and you don't want to mess around with it and get hot glue on you. So I went ahead and did my second one because if you need to pause the video right now to do your second one, go ahead and do that. Also, just an FYI, YouTube has the capability of you can speed up the video or slow it down. I might start sounding like Charlie Brown when you slow it down, you know, the teacher on Charlie Brown, or maybe Alvin and the Chipmunks if you go really fast. But you can do it at your different speeds, or like I say, go ahead and just pause it and then start again when you get caught up. Now the foam that I use is 9x6, but you can use really any size that you'd like. That just happens to be what I use. Okay, this is where you just kind of form the foam around the shoe and you decide how far up you want it to go, depending on what style of shoe you're going to do. Once you figure out how tall your shoe is going to be, now you can add another cup the other direction. So one's going upside down and one going right side up if you want your shoe to be a high top. And so that's when you would adjust how tall you do this part. But I kind of like the low tops probably the best. And that's what I've been doing more lately. If you look at the purple shoe or the red watermelon shoe, those are kind of the high top where I turn the cups around and so that it's a taller version of the same exact format that we're working on. And in those cases, you would want your foam to be taller so that it can cover it all. But that is just a personal preference. So either way works just as good as the other. Now, one thing that I will say, I do have a big sheet of foam core on top of my table so that I can cut directly to it. Now, of course, if you have a cutting mat or if you have a paper cutter, of course, you can use that for any of these things, but I'm just trying to show how you can make these with the most basic supplies that you can mostly pick up very easily at your local stores. As far as different ways to cut your foam, you can even just score it with the X-Acto knife so it doesn't cut through the table, and then cut it with a plain pair of scissors. And they don't even have to be sharp scissors. That's the beauty of foam. Now we have our 2 main templates, and I will say that this shoe is much smaller than some other shoes. I used to make them really big because I felt like they had to be so big in order to hold up the gnome. But now that I'm making my gnomes lighter weight, I don't need as big of shoe. I'll give you 2 or 3 different options on the templates, and you can decide how tall or how big you want your shoe or how small. Once you get that piece cut out for the upper portion of your shoe, you want the top part rounded off. And if you print the template, that works. Or if you're just doing your own like I am, you just kind of round off the 2 edges. Just like this. I would love to hear, I just absolutely love to hear where everyone is from. It's so much fun. I can't believe how many people from around the world are doing gnomes and around the country. I live in Nebraska, but I'd love to hear where you're from. Okay, now is when I make the decision. Am I going to do one with laces? Am I going to do a buckle with a strap? How do I want the front to look? And there's using this same style on these same templates, you can do it 2 different ways. So generally speaking, if you're going to have a lace up, even with the buckle, I like to put a tongue right up the front of the shoe. So you can see with the black shoe off camera a little bit that it still is folded over with the tongue, even though there's a buckle, or if you're going to lace it. Now, here's the part that really makes it so that it can look nice, and that is you want the upper portion of your shoe to go on the outer edge of the cups, but inside the sole. I'm hoping that makes sense. And then we'll trim the sole on the outer side of it. Okay, so I'm going to fold my gold part in half and I'll mark it because you want to be able to find the very center of the back of your shoe when you start this, so that when it comes around to the front, it will line up exactly in the middle. So that's why I fold that in half and mark it, and then I'm going to use my low temperature glue gun. And whenever I'm using foam, I'm going to try to use low temperature when at all possible. And I'm going to put 3 or 4 stripes along the back of the heel. And then I will press the foam up against that. Now I kind of squish it around so that there's no bumps of the glue once it dries. I don't want it to have those lines like they were. I want it to smash out flat as if you used a glue stick. And then you have to kind of press it around. And luckily this glue is not so hot, so it won't just seep through and burn your fingers. And you want the very bottom to be pressed around the little beveled edge, and that gives the shoe formation that you really want. And you want to hold that in place and let that really completely dry before you move on, because if it pops off, then you're going to have the foam with some glue and it'll leave a bump. So I like to clip it and let it just cool. And I went ahead, did the same thing with the second one, and now the second one is drying while I move on to the next part. So I'm not showing you the second shoe and I'm not showing drying time, but I'm trying to do everything else in real time. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing on the front end. I'm just going to put that little triangle on the front for the tongue of the shoe. And it only has to be glued on the very front part. I like to use these spatulas that you get in the makeup department at the Dollar Tree to get off any glue that I don't want there. You don't want any extra glue because it will leave a mark. But the beautiful part about this is this glue cools so fast. So if you get a little on your finger, you can just rub it off. It's not like the hot glue that's going to let you know if you touch it before it's cooled. Okay, so we got the back end and the front end glued down and dried, and then I can start gluing the bottom edge of the shoe. Now the whole entire portion of the shoe does not have to be glued, just right along the bottom, because the top part will be laced or buckled. Okay, so I'm going to add my low heat glue, And then I'm going to push this around. Now you can see how the black sole is coming out to the outside of this gold, and that's exactly how we want it. We want to be able to trim that down. If it doesn't, then that's when it's not a pretty edge, like I showed earlier on my husband's, who we did that during a live, and bless him, that was his first gnome shoe he'd ever made, and that was the perfect example for me to show, to be able to see what it is. If you are just following my directions and I'm not actually seeing what you're doing, then sometimes you can miss little parts. And so this was one of the parts that was lost in translation, let's just say. So yeah, you definitely want that bottom sole to be bigger than the other part. And this is why we had it bigger. So that once this is all glued down, you have to kind of hold it in place to let it finish drying. Then we can trim that out and it'll just look really nice. Even though we're going to do a trim around it, the seam looks so much better this way. I haven't done lives up until now because it kind of gives me a bit of a panic attack. But the good thing about it is I learned so much from all of you. So for our next live, we're going to be going live next Thursday. And we're going to be making a gnome. So I'll show you the top part of how I do those gnomes, which I have a lot of tutorials, but this time we'll be making it together so I can make sure I'm not missing any parts. And the one thing, I would love to hear your ideas for what type of gnome. I think we're going to do fisherman gnomes. I wanted to do, we don't talk about Bruno gnome, but I think that YouTube wouldn't allow it. So we have to do kind of generic, like a fisherman, a ballet dancer, mermaid, whatever. So I think I'm going to do something with a coat and a jacket or a vest or something. I have not done one of those yet. So yes, definitely tune in with us next Thursday. It's going to be fun. Okay, now I'm just marking off how I'm going to do the little edge that goes around the bottom of the sole. Now this, you can make it pretty thick or it can be, pretty thin. Again, this is just a matter of your idea that day, what look you want it to go with. Now, originally when I was making this, I was thinking that I was going to do kind of a tennis shoe look that has the white rounded toe on the front and the circles on the back side. But then it's just starting to look a little bit more glamorous. So I think I'm just going to have it look like a very glamorous woman's boot. So because I'm doing that, I'm creating this edge part thinner than I have with my other shoes in the past. Okay, now we're going to want to find the halfway mark again, and we'll start gluing from the front this time because we want the seam to be in the back of the shoe. We don't want it to show up on the front. So that's what I'm doing here. And again, we're going to use our low heat gun for this. Now, you'll notice as I'm going along here that, oh, yes, I love the glitter. Oh, my husband's so funny because glitter just is not his thing. But yes, I do love the glitter. But again, you can see how the black, I still haven't completely finished trimming until I have this trim just gets glued down along. And then the sole, I'll trim that off once I have the trim all the way around. And as you can see, as I'm tipping this over, I realized my black sole did not come out far enough on the front of this shoe. If I was making this to sell, I would probably have to start over right there because once the sole is glued on, you really cannot get it off. But since this is not for sale, I will just fill it in with some more foam. The beauty of using the black sole is I can use a black marker to fill in if there's glue that shows or anything like that. So I do like using black soles. They seem to work pretty good. Now, one thing that is kind of cool about using this foam, if you ever come where you have just a little tiny bit and it's not quite long enough, you can actually put glue right onto the foam and then grab it with your hands and stretch it out to fill in the rest of that gap. It does give a little, which is more than I can say for felt. I mean, felt is what it is. It's not going to move around at all or have any give. And so I think that's why I like the foam so much better than the felt. And it, of course, the glitter. Yeah, anybody who knows me knows I like glitter, I like glam, and I like bracelets. I tend to wear bracelets all the time. And yes, I don't have one on right now, but oh yeah, that's my thing. And I actually like to make a little bracelets to go on my female gnomes too. Sometimes you can't hardly even see them, but I know they're there because it's my thing. So yes, okay, now it's starting to come together. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and real quick speed this along for the second shoe because you get the idea. And I love keeping my rubber spatula handy to wipe away, even though the glue isn't that hot and I could almost just get it with my fingers. It just keeps it from getting messy, and you don't want any of the glue to be on your glitter or on the sole of your shoe. And I have found that it's pretty forgiving, especially over the glitter, that you can just kind of take your fingernail and just scrape away the glue so that it doesn't show up at all. And it's the little tiny fine details that really make a big difference. Now, once the edging is all glued on, you can cut the outer part of the sole off. And I like these little tiny scissors that you get in the Crafter's Corner section of the Dollar Tree because you can really get fine little tiny cuts, but you really wouldn't have to use this kind anything. And the best part about foam is it is so easy to work with, so easy to cut, and it looks so glamorous when it's done. So that is my tip or trick for the day, I guess. Now it's starting to come together. What's fun is I don't necessarily know exactly what the shoe is going to look like. I just make it up as I go along. I'll use the same basic format over and over again, but with different colors and different styles. Maybe as it's coming together, I realize, oh, I think I want this one to be more glamorous, or I want this one to look more like a tennis shoe, or I want it to look like a boot, or I want it to look like a sandal, whatever. Not a sandal, but a shoe, There's just so many different things, and I've used this same basic style with all these different colors. Now, I noticed that when we were doing our live, my husband actually gave me a fun little idea. He cut a little square and put it on the very back, and it's kind of like the logo mark, or it's not even the logo, it's just the name of the shoe. Generally, a lot of shoes will have those on the back, and I thought that is so cute. I might just steal his idea and put a little square on the back of the shoe. And again, like I was saying before, I think it's the fine little tiny details that really can make it so much fun. Now, here I am. I'm doing it in fast motion because I'm fixing my little mistake there. A lot of times you have oopsies, and that's okay. So I just put some more felt over that spot where I cut my sole too short. And again, the reason why I love black is you can just go along with a black marker and mark up anywhere where you see glue. Even though it has glitter, it really just kind of blends in, and then the soles start looking perfect. Now is when I have to make the decision whether I'm going to use laces or do a buckle. And I get these strings like the elastic string or different types of strings. I actually love to get the scatter. There's different decorative scatter that the Dollar Tree has at different holidays, and that can make some really fun embellishments for your gnomes and for your gnome shoes. And as I'm going along and I saw that scatter and saw that there was a gold circle scatter thing, orb, I don't know, it's not even an orb, but circle. Like, I think I'm going to make it like a big gold buckle on the front of this. So I'm going to go ahead and just glue down these edges rather than lacing them shut. And I will say this, with the low glue on, when you're gluing with glitter, it doesn't like to stick very well. So you do have to hold it longer than you would your normal hot glue. but it's worth it because if I use the other type of hot glue, at this point it might melt it and that would be a disaster. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use my low heat glue, take my circular scatter, and I will just put it right on the front there. And it really does need to have a minute to dry, and I don't always have the most patience, so I generally try to use some sort of a clip or something if at all possible, but this is not going to be able to be clipped. So I will just grab a rubber band, and it's mostly starting to dry, but just to keep holding it in place, I'm going to bend it into place, and then I'll get my rubber spatula and make sure no glue has oozed out anywhere, because we don't want the glue to mess up the glamorous gold glimmer that our shoe is starting to have. Okay, there's our second one that I did off camera. Now, I got this ribbon. It's not ribbon, it's yarn from Walmart, and it is my favorite thing. I use it on so many crafts. It's just a big, fat, puffy yarn, and that makes really fun tops for the boots and the shoes. And I use them on my Grinch. I've used them on I don't know what all. I just love it. I think sometimes I'm like, what else can I use with this yarn? Because it's so fun. It has kind of a glimmery, sparkly, shimmery something that's in it too. Anyway, I'm just going to go along and glue inside the inside edge of the shoe, and then glue that around so our boot is almost complete. I still need to make a few little tags that are like the little pull up your bootstrap tags to put on the outer edge, which I should have done before I put on my yarn, but I forgot. So that's going to have to come later. But look at that. It's starting to come together. Now, I just feel like it needs a little bit of, even though it's very sparkly, I just like to, since I know that I'm going glam with this, add a little sparkle gems. Now, there's different types of sticker sheets that you can get from the dollar store, and I use just the silver beaded kind to make it look on the bottom of the shoe, or you can use floral kind. There's just so many different styles, and this is where you have to make a decision. Which one do I want to use? And then there's these big sticker gems, and these you actually get from Walmart, and I love using these. I use these on home decor as well as with my gnomes and crafts. But even though they are stickers, they don't stay on, especially when you're gluing onto glitter. So you do need to add some hot glue to make sure they don't pop off. There's nothing worse than making a gnome and then 2 weeks later it's sitting on your shelf and you see the gem starting to pop off, and it would just be so embarrassing if you sold it to somebody and then they started coming apart. So that's why you definitely want to reinforce with glue. Now I'm going to go ahead and add some glam around my bottom. Even though it's shimmery black, I think it could go. I like to sometimes just add a few of those stickers on the front, and then I can just look at it and see, does it look okay, or is it too much, or is it the wrong color? And then once I have an idea of whether that's going to look good with the colors, then I'll go ahead and pull them off and put them on with the stickers. And I do this so that I can make sure that I have enough of them and I have the right sizes before I commit to gluing them down. And once you go around and make sure that it completely fits your shoe, then you can bring the glue back in and glue them on so they're nice and secure and ready for the market. I say market, you might be selling them for all I know. I personally don't sell them. I just make them for my tutorials and I give them away to neighbors and friends and different people. But you're absolutely welcome to sell them if you want to use this technique and sell them. That would be fantastic. I would love to hear what you do with your gnomes. Do you make them for fun? Make them for friends? Do you sell them? And Yeah, comment below and let me know what you do. I will admit that a lot of the craft type YouTube channel things that I watch, sometimes I don't even actually make. I find joy in just the process of watching them being made too. So that's where I'm at. Okay, so we're getting close to the finish line. And once you get that final bit of glam on your boot, that's when you realize, yes, that is exactly what it needed to give it the finishing touches to be the perfect little glam boot. Oh, I wish I had a pair of these to wear around. I love it. Now, since I glammed it up so much, I decided my little thing that you would use for a tennis shoe, didn't like it. So luckily it's not glued on too hard and I can just pull that off, add the rest of the glam. I'm going to add off camera my little bootstraps, and otherwise that is how it works. And then I can take any style of gnome and use my cute little, I always say cute, I just think they're so fun, these little tiny adapters. Put it in and I'll show you how this would work. Now pretend like this gnome is all doctored up and ready to go, and you pop it on like that, and voila, that's how you go. There we go. That's all there is to it. Now you can be a professional gnome shoemaker, and the thing that I love to do is make a lot of shoes, and then I come up with an idea to have the gnomes match the shoes. It's so much fun. Now I have a lot of tutorials, and I'll put some links down in this description below, because there are so many different things that you can do now that you have the basic gnome shoe tutorial down. All right, we are planning another live a week from tomorrow, so don't forget to ring that bell to all. There's been a couple of things, I'm still learning what I'm doing, so sometimes we have glitches, and if you have the bell ring to all, then you'll know if one goes down and another comes up, which is what we had to do last time. We had to redo our live. So yeah, ring that bell to all, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you soon.